rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the grave. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's blood. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. He is Lord, Lord of all. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's blood. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's blood. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all.
We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and 3 this morning. So I made up my mind that I would not make another painful visit to you. For if I grieved you, who was left to make me glad, but you whom I have grieved? I wrote as I did, so that when I came I would not be distressed by those who should have made me rejoice. I had confidence in all of you, that you would all share my joy. For I wrote you out of the greatest distress and anguish of heart and with many tears, not to grieve you, but to let you know the depth of my love for you. If anyone has caused grief, he has not so much grieved me as he has grieved all of you to some extent. Do not put it too severely. The punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient. Now instead, you ought to forgive and comfort him, so that you will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him. Another reason I wrote you was to see if you would stand the test and be obedient in everything. Anyone you forgive, I also forgive. And what I have forgiven, if there was anything to forgive, I have forgiven in the sight of Christ and for your sake, in order that Satan might not outwit us. For we are not unaware of his schemes. Now when I went to Troas to preach the gospel of Christ and found that the Lord had opened a door for me, I still had no peace of mind because I did not find my brother Titus there. So I said goodbye to them and went on to Macedonia. But thanks be to God, who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are to God the pleasing aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and to those who are perishing. And to the one we are an aroma that brings death, to the other an aroma that brings life. And who is equal to such a task? Unlike so many, we do not peddle the word of God for profit. On the contrary, in Christ we speak before God with sincerity, as those sent from God. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again? Or do we need, like some people, letters of recommendation to you or from you? You yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Such confidence we have through Christ before God. Now that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. He has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Now if the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory, so that the Israelites could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of its glory, transitory though it was, will not the ministry of the Spirit be even more glorious? If the ministry was that brought condemnation was glorious, how much more glorious is the ministry that brings righteousness? For what was glorious has no glory now in comparison with this surpassing glory. And if what was transitory came with glory, how much greater is the glory of that which lasts? Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who put a veil over his face to prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away. But their minds were made dull. For to this day the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed, because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to the day when Moses is read, the veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and the Spirit of the Lord is, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Yes. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the Spirit. We thank you that you are with us both during the good times and with the trials. We thank you that you meet with us even here today. Now, Lord, bless the word to our hearts and bless the minister as she preaches. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We first began this series on 1st and 2nd Corinthians back in September. We began looking at the situation in Corinth and the church divided. There were groups that were following Apollos. There were groups that were following Cephas. There were groups that were following Paul. They had grown to appreciate a person's style of preaching. And they had made a style of preaching evidence of whether or not that person was speaking truth. Paul had come to them with a simple style, a bare bones, blunt, to the point way of bringing a message. And when you compare that to a style that is more flourishing, that is more vibrant with adjectives like azure blue and things like that. When you compare a simple style versus a flourishing style, people are inclined to think that the flourishing style speaks truth. And so there is this loyalty that develops around style. And Paul addressed that to the church in Corinth. He addressed the differences in their approach to sexual matters. There were some that say, everything's okay. And there were some that say, nothing's okay. And Paul addressed that, this division that was happening because of moral issues. Paul addressed the division that was taking place because of wealth. There were people who were wealthy who wanted to stay wealthy. And there were people who were poor who aspired to be wealthy. Imagine that. And Paul addressed this issue of money in saying that the people who were wealthy were mistreating the poor because of their wealth. And the whole conclusion of the letter, called for unity. We have all been gifted. We all have a call. But we who are of one body, who are one body, are of one spirit. We partake of one loaf. This is to be a united fellowship. If we are going to be the hands and feet of Jesus on earth, then there needs to be unity. And now here we are in 2 Corinthians. As you read 2 Corinthians through, it seems that whatever Paul said to them the first time didn't really sink in. Because the 2 Corinthian church is in much worse shape than they were in 1 Corinthians. Now, of course, there were multiple letters that went back and forth between Paul and the Corinthians. So if we had all of the letters, this would be more like 5th Corinthians, not 2 Corinthians. We just don't have copies of those other letters. So here we are in 5th Corinthians. Paul has his back and forth that's going on. And what is happening here in this letter is there is a small group within the church in Corinth. And this small group has begun to make a list of complaints about Paul, saying that he is not a good spiritual leader for them. In fact, he is wholly unqualified for ministry. And they have this list of complaints. We have to go back into chapter 1 to see them all. But the first complaint that they have against him is that Paul had said, we're going to do this, I'm going to do this, this is what we're going to do, and then he canceled everything. And they say, Paul, how can you say you're a pastor? How can you say you're a minister of the gospel and cancel everything? That's not how it's done. And Paul's response to them in chapter 1, verse 12 is this. Now this is our boast. Our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relations with you, in the holiness and sincerity that are from God. We have done so not according to worldly wisdom, but according to God's grace. They were saying, when you canceled everything, you were going against God. And Paul says to them, everything that I have done may not look right according to worldly wisdom, but it's what God has been leading me to do. Minute by minute, I am following God. Minute by minute, I am following God's will. God is leading me in everything that I do. Yes, these were the plans. And yes, I did cancel the plans. But it's because God directed me to do that in the time that I was doing these things. I answer to God as an apostle. I do not answer to you, the church. My call is from God, not from you. And I will do what God calls me to do, and not what you tell me to do. So that's the first complaint that the Corinthians have. And the second complaint is this. The second complaint that they have against Paul is that he doesn't love them. They say, Paul, that last letter you wrote to us was so mean. How can you say that you are from God when you're just so mean to us? And you know what Paul says? Paul says this, I wrote as I did, so that when I came, I should not be distressed by those who ought to make me rejoice. I had confidence in all of you that you would all share my joy. For I wrote you out of great distress and anguish of heart, and with many tears, not to grieve you, but to let you know the depths of my love for you. Paul says, I wrote to you the way that I did because I love you. I said to you the things that I said because I love you. And in fact, dear church in Corinth, I didn't even tell you everything. I held back. Part of the reason why I canceled my plans is so that I wouldn't come and further grieve you. The reason why God led me away is so that you would not be further broken by the words that you need to be told about the sin in your life. There was a person who was sinning, and I addressed that sin. But in order to keep that person so that they could continue to grow in their faith, I did not say all that could have been said. I did not do all that could have been done. Because the goal here is restoration of fellowship. And you, as a church, need to restore to fellowship that one who has sinned against all of us. I did not say everything because I love you, not because I hate you. Now the third complaint that they had against Paul, he doesn't address until we get to chapter 10. But their complaint was this. Paul is a conniver, and all he wants is to fill his pockets and to enrich himself on the backs of the Corinthians. That was the third complaint. He was a conniver, and that he was coming in and doing a huckster's work. And that's from the Greek, huckster. Look it up. That Paul was a huckster, a conniver, and that he is coming into Corinth to gain for himself. And Paul doesn't address that charge until chapter 10, as we said. But as we move into chapter 3, we see that Paul compares himself to Moses. Moses, says Paul, went up on Mount Sinai, and he was in the presence of God. And when he was in the presence of God, the glory of God was on him. And when he came down the mountain to the Israelites, he was full of the glory of God. In fact, he was so full of the glory of God that he had to put a veil on his face, because the people couldn't even look at him. He was so full of the glory of God. And Moses brought to them the word of the Lord and taught them the will of God. And you know what the Israelites did? They rejected Moses. Now Paul is now comparing himself to Moses. And he says, you know how that happened? You know this story. You went to bed on this story every night. Your mother told you this story. Moses goes up on the mountain. He comes back down with the glory of God on him. Nobody can look at him. But Israel rejected him. In the same way, you, Corinth, are rejecting me. This is the same thing that happened to Moses. So Corinth, listen up. Do you know why Israel rejected Moses? They didn't have God in them. And they were not able to see what Moses had seen. That's why Israel rejected Moses. Application. Dear Corinth, you are rejecting the apostle, called by God, commissioned by God, working for God, because you don't have the Spirit in you. to make the clear application to this church about this church's appraisal of my ministry at this point in time. As we have begun this Sunday, today, to move into our 4th year, there are those, a minority group, who are critical of my ministry, who have said, you've canceled everything. You have no faith. You're mean and you don't love us. And if you were really called, then this church would be doing better. You know what Paul said to that? He said, the fact that you exist, Corinth, is the testimony that God has called me. That is my comfort today. We have been through it this year, but we continue to exist today. And that, to me, is the letter and the seal of my ministry here. That God has called me to lead this church and you people. Seek God. Seek His face. And seek to see where God is taking us as a church. Because if you seek God and you are filled with His Spirit, then you will see the same way I see. Let's pray. Jesus, in your days, as you walked the earth among us, there were those who looked at your ministry and said, you are not from God. In these days, there are still people who look at the work that you are doing and say, this isn't from God. But we're evaluating by a worldly wisdom and not by the wisdom of God, which often asks us to go where it's not wise to go, to do what is not possible to do, and to expect what isn't even reasonable to think will happen. I believe, Lord, that you are leading me even now. And I pray, Lord, that you will continue to hold me up, that I will be the hands and feet of Jesus in this community. And that when people look at me and my life and my work, they will see you. Pray this in Jesus' name.